Hey, Focus Miss Gaming here. So, you want to draft Venusaur. It's the first Pokemon a lot of people discover when they first play the series, and honestly, it's a pretty good option, all things considered. So, let's discuss and decide why is it a good Pokemon to draft in the first place. So, first of all, looking at its general stats, if you look over here on the side, it's got a bunch of middling stats, so to speak. So if you're used to looking at like legendary Pokemon or a lot of different like specialized endgame Pokemon, it doesn't share those high-end stats that you see. So I've listed here pretty average for HP, attack, defense, gets a B grade for all of those. Now understand a B grade is still very usable. It can run a physical set or be a physical wall, so to speak, but it's not going to be the greatest at it. Whereas its special defense and attack is where it's going to see most of its use, because it's just hitting that 100 mark. And that's still, again, not great unboosted, but there's things that we can do to help that along. And its speed is a B, but I could put an asterisk here, just because that speed, depending on how you use Venusaur, is a bit deceptive. Because you can run this thing really fast, or you can run it extremely slow. And that brings it to its typing. And a lot of times, certain Pokemon's typing kind of determines what kind of role it fits because of the type matchups that it's inherent to and what it can actually go against and resist or is really weak to. Like certain Pokemon with quad resists are pretty awful for defense a lot of the time. But Venusaur has this wonderful position of being a grass and poison type, which means it's going to be weak to fire, flying, ice, and psychic, which are all very offensive types, so you're going to see threats of those variety, but it also resists grass, electric, fairy, fighting, and water. All other very common types that you'll see offensively. People love drafting their fairy types. They like fast electrics. Fighting types and water types are always going to be super relevant. Grass types, not as much, but that's neither here nor there. And immunities, it's got none, which again isn't the greatest. You do like certain immune Pokemon to help wall things. Venusaur isn't going to necessarily do that, but it can definitely stymie a lot of those other threats that fall into those resist category. As for its abilities, Chlorophyll is what really makes this guy go. I ranked it as an A rank kind of ability. It's not the tippy top kind of like broken abilities, but it's got a very specific strategy that works really well for it. And well as it also has Overgrow. Overgrow gets a D because it is usable. It does have some kind of use. It's just you're not going to see it come up all too often unless you're running some kind of like Custap Berry Endure set that's going to be like power whipping things to death, which would be super funny, but probably not your go-to idea. And so we're going to be looking at a few example sets, but let's outline what are the main moves that you're going to be clicking when you draft Venusaur, because every Pokemon, Venusaur included, has a bunch of moves that are very useful to it, and then a lot that are tutored through the game or acquired through like trades and stuff like that, which don't really see much use. Like you're not going to be clicking Frenzy Plant on this guy because in a draft setting you're playing Nat decks. You don't want to take turns off necessarily. So looking at the important moves right here, we've got our stab options. These are the ones you want to click for big damage. So we're looking at Sludge Bomb, Giga Drain, Energy Ball. Even gets Grass Knot, I believe, which in very certain matchups it might be better than those two. It also gets Leaf Storm, which is a very strong move, but comes with the downside of nerfing your special attack. Solar Beam, on the other end, is again a very strong move, but has the drawback of needing either Power Herb or Sun to be present. And then on the physical side, it's got Poison Jab and Petal Blizzard as its best stab options. Now, could you run Seed Bomb, for example? Yeah, but there's not really a point to when you have just a higher base power move present. As for utility, it gets access to Sleep Powder, which is a very risky move to click a lot of the time. It also gets Leech Seed, which is super great when you're running grass types, because a lot of the time you get Leech Seed as an exclusive move to those kinds of Pokemon, and it can help you really run a bulkier set or something with longevity and substitute. Otherwise, it gets Synthesis, which again synergizes with that Sun plan, as well as Knockoff and Toxic, which helps with a lot of the tempo style control that you can use Venusaur if you don't want to have it just be a super fast Sun Bomb. And then its coverage moves. So, unfortunately, while Venusaur has pretty solid typing, all things considered, it doesn't get a crazy amount of coverage that's really useful. I didn't include Outrage here because Outrage, while very strong, it's just you don't really need dragon coverage unless you know you're going to be facing a dragon type specifically, but Weather Ball is really useful as its fire type option in the sun. Also has some niche cases if you want to run it on a rain team, for example, or if you end up against like a sand team, you get a rock move with base 100 power, which is great. Can also be rain and snow if you're running like Chilly Reception with Slowking, and that can give you an ice move, which is really cool with him, Venusaur, they not having much. Also, Earth Power and Earthquake gives you ground coverage, which is really sweet for really threatening a lot of those electric types out that really don't have a good matchup against them anyways. And there's going to be Terra Blast for leagues that allow Terra. Gives you basically any option that you need, kind of like Hidden Power. Venusaur does have the unique opportunity where it can kind of leverage that Terra Blast to either be special or physical, depending on what kind of walling options your opponent may have. Now, I wanted to look over on the right side to show you some sample Venusaur sets. Now, understand these aren't the definitive end-all be-all Venusaur sets, but they're probably going to be the more common ones you'll find in draft. So the first one we have is the Sun Venu set, which is going to be running a Life Orb with Chlorophyll. You're going to have maxed out special attack with Modest Nature, so you have minus attack. We have 0 in the IVs because that's just a good habit to get in for avoiding a move called Foul Play, so you don't have to worry about that as much. And then high speed, so if the sun's present, you're going to be outrunning a lot of different threats that are super fast anyways. But remember, you're on a timer, so you have to make the most of that time. That's why we're running Life Orb, because even if Venusaur gets killed, the idea is we're taking something with it. So that's why we're running Weather Ball, we're running Solar Beam, Earth Power, and Sludge Bomb. So for attacks, we are trying to maximize our coverage, punish switch-ins, and the Terra type we're running here is we're running Terra Fire. So we want to switch it up. If we want to dodge any water attacks that may happen if they turn off the sun, for instance, and really boost the Weather Ball damage under the sun. You could also opt for Terra Grass here if you really want to go all in on Solar Beam. It really depends on your matchup here. Stab options are never a bad option to use Terastallization, but that is the general idea for Life Orb Sun Venu. Now, there's another type of Venusaur that we can look at here, which is going to be the version 2, which is going to be rocking heavy-duty boots. And this time, we're going to include a little bit of setup. So, same spread as previously. We have maxed out special attack, high speed, and this time we're going to run Weather Ball, Terra Blast, Growth to boost our special attack, and then also Earth Power. So we're trading out some of the stab versatility because we're also going to run Terra-type Fairy because we want to maximize our coverage. We want to be able to hit Dark types and Dragon types pretty hard. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll be weak to Steel types too, because odds are we'll be faster, and either Weather Ball or Earth Power are going to damage them and threaten them greatly. So it gives us a little bit of insurance to make sure they can't just bring in Earthworm, for example. It's like, we can click Weather Ball and we'll delete them. Same with like a Steelix or something like that. Heavy Duty Boots is just to make sure we get off the growth in the first place. So if there's Stealth Rocks or normal spikes up, we don't have to worry about that inconsequential damage. This set is going to work better with something like Ninetales or Torkoal that are holding a Sun Rock. That way, you actually get the turn to get off your growth, and then you can go to town to 4 to 5 turns, unless they have, say, some kind of weather nullifying effect or changing weather. Whereas the initial Sun Venu set, you don't really need Torkoal or Ninetales. They are nice to set it, but this can also work with a manual weather setter. Also, if you didn't like one of these stab options, like Sludge Bomb or Solar Beam, or like, I don't really need the coverage, you could switch this out for Manual Sunny Day as well. That kind of serves as like your agility, quote unquote. That also turns on your Weather Ball, which would be really nice if you think you can afford that. And then you're just trying to shoot everything down and do massive damage. Now, that's the more offensive side of Venusaur. You can run physical sets in the Sen too. It just tends to have better special attack just because of the stat being higher and its options being a little bit more varied. Now, bulky Venusaur. Here, we're maximizing HP and special defense. So this one's specially defensive. This is what you would rock if you see like the other team has like a Primarina, for example. You want somebody to switch in and be able to take easy chip damage. We're running Black Sludge as the leftover alternative because when you have a poison type and you want to run it bulky, general idea is if they have a trick user on the other team, you want to be able to make sure they don't just steal your leftovers. You want to punish those kinds of maneuvers. So it's just generally a little habit to be nice. Keynote, though, is when you do run Black Sludge, do not choose a Terra type if you plan on using Terra with your poison type, in this case Venusaur, because then the Sludge will start to hurt you. As we know, each turn you'll lose an eighth of your health, which is a lot in this economy. So if you have a different Terra type, you can choose leftovers. If not, Black Sludge is fine. For the moves, though, this is being a very defensive and passive kind of Venusaur. We are running Toxic, Synthesis, Leaf Storm, and Roar. So, clicking Toxic, toxicking the opposing Pokemon. Synthesis is to heal up any residual damage as they might get toxicked, and you're like, oh no, I gotta switch to something that can handle it. So they might click U-turn or Volt Switch or something like, or some kind of pivot move. Synthesis, you can outlast things that might try to set up on you. Leaf Storm is to punish anybody too that wants to sit in. Now, the alternative item for this kind of set too is if you want to drop a Toxic, then just click Leaf Storm. Something to note is Venusaur doesn't really have any pivots, so you could put an Eject Pack here instead. So if we look at Eject Pack, Eject Pack is when your stats are lowered. You get a switch to an ally, which is really nice. Eject Button could be used too. I like Eject Pack a little bit more because if you're attacking something that's a little bit bulkier and you just want that chip, Leaf Storm's immediately going to pivot you out into something else. Well as the button, it does run the risk of getting code, right? Getting knocked out as you want to try and pivot. And you're like, well, I got my pivot off, I got knocked out, but now I can't use Venusaur again. So we want to reserve using button for things that have like Iron Barbs. It's better on things like Ferrothorn, for example, or things that have contact abilities like Flame Body or Static, because they incentivize getting hit. Now, the ability here as we picked Overgrow is if we know we're not going to encounter any weather, Chlorophyll's pretty useless, so we have to use Overgrow, and that's why the only option we are choosing is Leaf Storm, because Overgrow does maximize that offensive stat if we do get really low on HP. So if we take a hit, we can survive, click Leaf Storm with low HP, pivot us out, and do pretty hefty damage for an uninvested 100 base attack. It does give us a significant boost, and a lot of people aren't going to account for that in the calculator, which is kind of nice. Lastly, there's Mega Venusaur. As we know, Mega Pokemon are drafted all the time, usually exclusively different than normal Venusaur. Now, the thing is, Mega Venusaur can still run the Chlorophyll set. It can still run those offensive versions. It just means it's going to be holding its Venusaur Mega Evolution item instead of something like Life Orb or Heavy Duty Boots. So that kind of limits it, but you can use it in that niche if you wish. Now, for this Mega Venusaur set in particular, we note it gets Thick Fat. Thick Fat's a great ability because all those ice and fire moves that it would be weak to narrows the field, so only Flying and Psychic are really going to threaten Mega Venusaur now. Well, it still gets all those wonderful resistances, and it does get a pretty substantial boost to all of its defense, special attack, and special defense. So you can still run, again, a special attacking set and variant of this, but mostly Mega Venusaur is going to sit in on various threats and it's going to be an obnoxious wall for your opponents to try and chew through. And that's why you want to click things like Leech Seed and Toxic and Knockoff. I did include Curse on this set as well because if you're able to sit in, build up curses, you can just keep clicking Knockoff and boost up that damage as well as your physically defensive walling capabilities. You could also, again, have this be specially defensive and do about the same role. It really depends on your matchup. But here we just went with the higher stat, and then we went with negative special attack because we're not using it. And you could go negative speed, but we're already going to be lowering our speed, so it doesn't really matter here as much. Now, scrolling down, so team fits, it's going to be a Sunny Day Weather Abuser. It's a mid-range tempo kind of Pokemon as well for its good T-Spike Absorber. That's also not weak to EQ, so those grounded poison types that aren't weak to Earthquake, few and far between. And it works as a pretty reliable status spreader as well. Toxic being 100% accurate with a poison type is really hard to be mad at. And having access, at least the threat of Sleep Powder, is enough to frighten some people to running like safety goggles against you. Especially if you run it once, you at least show that, hey, I'm thinking about this set. Now it's in people's mind. They look at your replays and they're like thinking, okay, I got to account for this. General items to think about are Black Sludge, Life Orb, Lefties, Eject Pack, Rocky Helmet if you want to lean into that kind of bulky Venusaur set here. You want to go more defensive and you're like, hey, I know this guy's going to be clicking a lot of U-turn on me, so I want to be able to punish that a little bit and get some chip. There's also the option if you want to run 4 attacks for Sun Venusaur and you're like, man, Life Orb doesn't really get me there. It only maybe does 70, so why not switch that out for an Assault Vest? I know I'm going to get hit, specially, and maybe I can kill the opposing Pokemon in 2 hits. So that's why maybe I run AV. There's other items you could run as well. These are going to be the most prevalent, I believe. You could run a berry, for example, whether it's a Resist Berry or an Agave Berry. Those are going to be more matchup dependent, I would say. If you're going to run a Resist Berry, you're probably running some kind of setup substitute set, for example, which is going to be more on the uncommon side than anything else. But those sets do exist, is when you have all these kind of average stats across the board, nothing's really off limits for this kind of Pokemon, which is kind of cool. So that kind of leaves us with Terra options. So Stab is always going to be what's recommended for most Pokemon, is you stay in one of your primary attacking types if you have any offensive capabilities. There's few situations where if you're never going to click an attacking move on a certain Pokemon, you might not want to keep your Stab option. But the other options to increase your move pool, because that is one of Venusaur's little weaknesses, is Fire, Fairy, and Water. Again, those are just some general recommendations that have blanket capabilities that kind of flip the resistances on its head a little bit. But you could also run something like Ground if you want to prevent Volt Switch, for example. Or you could run Terra Flying if you want to avoid an Earthquake. Steel as well is another one if it's like, hey, I just want to be very resistant to Fairy and Dragon effects. That's an option too. And it's not like Venusaur gets Flash Cannon, so you'd have effectively that as well. So ultimately, where am I drafting Venusaur? When should I do it? Is it worthy of a first pick? Short answer, no. It's a pretty average Pokemon, but average in a draft is pretty okay. Like, you're going to have to draft some average level Pokemon. Probably around 3 to 4 of your roster are going to be in that kind of average tier. So just because it does have kind of a high-end comp for fitting on Sun teams as being that very good Chlorophyll abuser and speed control, you can see this thing taken as early as round 3. If somebody says, like, hey, I'm going to take Walking Wake round 1, I'm going to take Torkoal round 2, and I'm going to take Venusaur round 3. That's pretty standard for a Sun setup. Somebody might take it later as well, prioritizing other pieces of that kind of composition. Otherwise, if you're somebody that's like, hey, it's just I need a grass type, I need a T-Spike Absorber, I need something that has some versatility with some utility moves, but also can provide some offense, then you might see it drafted more closer to rounds 4, 5, and 6 as kind of that glue that helps keep your team together, as well as not being a complete hindrance on the resistant chart in weighing your team down, so to speak. So those are the places I would take Venusaur and the rationale behind it. It's not a really good type if you're like, hey, I want to poison, but I need it to be my T-Spiker. Venusaur doesn't really offer that. It has to manually, I say manually, but has to click Toxic to get that status off. It isn't going to passively accrue that, something like a Glamora. So ultimately, I think it's a great draft pick. I think out of the Cantonian starters, it's probably the second best Pokemon. Um, we'll talk a little bit later on what the others and where they kind of fall, but it gets a solid B rank from me. Um, take it in the mid rounds. I would maybe not take it any earlier than 3. Again, if you're taking it 3, you're probably dedicated weather. My sweet spot for this is probably between 4 and 5. If you're getting at 6, that probably means you don't have a weather team, a sun team at least rocking around, or they found an alternative. But I would think it's anything beyond 6 is going to be extremely good value, depending on how you've managed your points up in that point in draft. So hopefully you found this helpful, and do draft Venusaur. It's pretty darn good in the right setup. It definitely needs some help, but it can really bring a team together. So thanks for listening. Let me know if you draft Venusaur and how it did for you. If you got any wacky sets you want to share that had some good success. Again, there's plenty of other sets out there. These are just some generalized ones that I've seen floating around. I've seen personally. I've used some of these. I think it's great. So let me know. This has been Focus Miss Gaming, and thanks for listening.